So hello, and welcome back. And I can't believe that this is episode 30, which is just amazing. And we're actually starting up in chapter 3. We're actually beginning the readings. Yay! So right view, chapter 3, right view, beginning with the actual readings themselves that Bhikkhu compiled and put together for us in this book. Speaking of the book, if you are following along, I am reading On the Path, an anthology on the Noble Eightfold Path, drawn from the Pāli Canon by Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, an American Buddhist monk who's widely respected for his translations of Buddhist texts and teachings on meditation and the Dhamma, primarily from the Theravāda tradition. And if you're following along in the Discord server, then you'll notice under the book club channel that you can follow kind of a hidden buried thread called Notes from On the Path. And this is where I will add additional material, as I'm reading and I'm commenting as things come up, things I'm curious about, things that I have questions about. This is typically where I'll go back later after I drop an episode and I'll post them here for anyone who's interested. So as I mentioned, we are starting on the readings, and that means that we're beginning today on the bottom of page 152 with Sutta 54. And welcome. All right, well, I'll tell you one thing. There's probably going to be a lot of ignorance tonight as we come up into the suttas, but I will do my best. So yes, beginning with the readings, and this is Sutta 54. Suppose there were a man seeking a water snake, wandering in search of a water snake. He would see a large water snake and grasp it by the coils or by the tail. The water snake, turning around, would bite him on the hand, on the arm, or on one of his limbs, and from that cause he would suffer death or death-like suffering. Why is that? Because of the wrong graspedness of the water snake. In the same way, there is the case where some worthless men study the Dhamma. Having studied the Dhamma, they don't ascertain the meaning of those Dhammas with their discernment. Not having ascertained the meaning of those Dhammas with their discernment, they don't come to an agreement through pondering. They study the Dhamma both for attacking others and for defending themselves in debate. They don't reach the goal for which people study the Dhamma. Their wrong grasp of those Dhammas will lead to their long-term harm and suffering. Why is that? Because of the wrong graspedness of the Dhammas. Well, this is great. I'm looking forward to looking up the cultural reference of the water snake later on. I'm sure that this would have more meaning to someone who has more familiarity with the cultural background here and maybe the historical background of the Buddha. But I love this idea, and it reminds me, so I just have to share this with you. I use AI a lot, and I like to test it critical thinking wise. I kind of like, will ask it questions, and then it will make claims, and then I will go in and look at the claims, and then if I see that maybe there's false reasoning going on, I'll push back, and this is kind of the way that I work with ChatGPT. And that came to mind because I think that one of the things that, at least for myself, that I am seeing with the AI, and again, I don't understand enough about how AI works I try to reserve any kind of commentary when I don't really know anything about a thing. And, I'm a psychologist, so I don't really understand how AI learns precisely. But I just have to recommend sometimes trying this out, if you haven't already been doing that, kind of having conversations with AI like this, because AI talks about this. That's why I'm bringing it up. And if you really want to be in for a surprise, for instance, and I'm bringing this up for you because we've been talking in the thread, and I've been having conversations with it about, how do you view how the West portrays Buddhism? And wow, it's pretty harsh, but that's what is coming to mind for me here. But I don't want to get too far off the rails so early on. I'll just say that if this is, to my understanding of Buddhism, at least what I have been taught and what makes sense to me as I read this and as I reflect on my own practice and different teachers that I've had, is that if one is going into this in this way, looking for a way to attack or defend, cling or avoid, cling to the view, cling to their view, or avoid cognitive dissonance, then I think they've kind of missed the point of what the Buddha was really kind of getting at here with the third noble truth, the real kind of insight, that what are you clinging to? Well, anyway, I'm already going off the rails, right? And let me check the chat, but really, yeah, great setup there. Nodding yes. Okay, great. Okay, so I'll just kind of keep on reading here. Suppose there were a man needing a water snake, seeking a water snake, wandering in search of a water snake. He would see a large water snake and pin it down firmly with a cleft stick. Having pinned it down firmly with a forked stick, he would grasp it firmly by the neck. Then, no matter how much the water snake might wrap its coils around his hand, his arm, or any of his limbs, he would not from that cause suffer death or death-like suffering. Why is that? Because of the right graspedness of the water snake. In the same way, there is the case where some clansmen study the Dhamma. Having studied the Dhamma, they ascertain the meaning of those Dhammas with their discernment. Having ascertained the meaning of those Dhammas with their discernment, they come to an agreement through pondering. They don't study the Dhamma either for attacking others or for defending themselves in debate. They reach the goal for which people study the Dhamma. Their right grasp of those Dhammas will lead to their long-term welfare and happiness. Why is that? Because of the right graspedness of the Dhammas, and that's MN 22. And again, the best that I can do here is just to kind of, give commentary on what I think Bhikkhu means, and then as we get into this, obviously the suttas, what is possibly meant here. And again, a reiteration of what's been talked about previously quite a bit. Just the importance of discernment. And what I'm taking away from this here is that a word that I heard often when I was first learning about Buddhism, and I would hear different teachers use this word subtle a lot. Subtle mind. What the heck is that, subtle mind? What are you talking about, subtle mind? What does that even mean? Well, I think I have an understanding now, because of practice, and I'm not special, as I said in the last episode. I really believe that anybody can, see that if they put in the practice and sit through the fire and all that. But I think, what's getting got at here is also just this radical, there really is almost a radical demand to kind of drop that kind of, that it's such an overused word in the West, that egoic clinging, but really after a fashion, right? That need to defend, that need to be right. All of that is kind of associated with, I think, that egoic clinging. And he's saying here, look, the right graspedness is not to grasp. That's kind of how I'm taking this. Or to grasp rightedly would be to use your discernment properly, to use the pondering, that is discussed in earlier sections and in the Noble Truths, and particularly I think it's the third. I forget. Again, I'm not a scholar, so it's not really cemented in there. But anyway, I think that's what he's getting got at here. I'm just going to check the chat, and then I'll move on. Oh, you're writing. Great. So I'll kind of come back in here in just a moment to see what you've written. And yeah, feel free if I miss that, or if you have something that you want to share. And yeah, I love to talk about it. So I'm just going to get on to the next section, which is, if you are following along in the book, yay, we finally get a heading here. So in chapter 3, it would be mundane right view under the readings, and that's Sutta 55. Now, what is the faculty of conviction? There's the case where a monk, a disciple of the Noble Ones, has conviction, is convinced of the Tathagata's awakening, and I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Indeed, the Blessed One is worthy and rightly self-awakened, consummate in clear knowing and conduct, well gone, an expert with regard to the cosmos, unexcelled trainer of people, fit to be tamed, teacher of devas and human beings, awakened, blessed. This is called the faculty of conviction, and that's from SN 4810. I'm just going to check the comments here again real quick and see. I've heard of grasping described as holding a tight fist and letting go as simply relaxing your palm by letting it open. I love that. I love that because it's so embodied. You know, wow, you know, I'm learning now, but it certainly took me long enough. And I'm just so glad. I kind of feel like as a species, we're kind of, sometimes words have just become so trite to my view that I just don't even want to repeat them for fear of, because the ideas I feel like we talk about in here, they're not trite, to my mind. These are the big questions, but I feel like we are having some kind of a big en masse kind of realization of some kind, and well, I'm just really glad for it. I hope that that's true, and as we do, I think we'll come to discover that so much of this is about being in the body, and oftentimes when I've met people who have reported back to me, wow, I'm really having trouble with the meditation, Barker, or, I'm just, I don't, whatever it might be, frustration, the myriad things that we experience. Oftentimes what I find is if there can just be a way somehow to, and this is why I think I really appreciate what we're learning about, about the breath and the power of the breath and different kinds of breathing techniques, because I think somehow if you can just help people get from the mind into the body, then I almost feel like there can start to be a real kind of Gnostic kind of appreciation for some of this. But I've also talked to people who said that that's just not so, and what do I know, but I love your analogy. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think when people have that experience of releasing the fist in breath, sometimes they're just like, whoa. Like it just never occurred to them that, wow, I can like make my breath be longer, like I can make my in-breath be longer, and I can make my out-breath be longer, and that actually changes the way I feel in my body, and that can really blow people's minds. But yeah, anywho, once again, I go off the rails. Okay, so I'm gonna keep on reading. Yeah, mundane right view. So I just learned about Tathagata, and again, I hope I got that right, last episode or the episode before, where I had to look it up for the episode. And I'm not looking at my notes right now. I'm not looking actually at the On the Path thread right now. But as I recall, it is this idea, that you recognize, that Buddha was this, and that you recognize that he had an experience, that he woke up or whatever the phrase might be. If you've listened to earlier episodes, then I talk a lot again about how I did not come up in Buddhism. I certainly did not grow up with it in my home. It was not introduced to me as a child. It's not part of my early conditioning in Buddhism fabrication, right? So when I get to ideas like this, right, where they start, and one of the things I really appreciate about Buddhism, and this is my understanding, and again, I come from more of like a Theravāda tradition, is where I, my understanding is that, the idea is that, Buddha may have, had some profound experiences and kind of jhana experiences, but he still was a man, and he wasn't worshipped as a god. And I believe that's my understanding. And so when I look at suttas like this, I think what I'm understanding is that what's being said here is that, that you have the conviction that he did it, and that it's possible. And I don't know if I'm imputing my own view on this, but I again, not a scholar, can't just automatically pull suttas like some can, which I think is so impressive. But I feel fairly certain, that the Buddha was pretty clear that, he never wanted us to look to him in that way, but really expected us to see for ourselves. But that this is more about kind of having that conviction. Here's a guy who did it. It's possible for me. I learned really well that way. I think it appeals to my logos, which is definitely much more of how you can appeal to my reason, is, much more of more than ethos, or, well, ethos too, but more than pathos, definitely logos, and that's another thing I like about Buddhism. It's very kind of logical after fashion, to my mind. So anyway, that's kind of how I'm taking Sutta 55 and this idea of, I got it right. Oh, hey. Oh my gosh, wow, okay, well, that's right on. I'm glad to know I haven't been having it wrong all these years. Oh my goodness. So Sutta 56, having approached the contemplatives and Brahmins who hold that whatever a person experiences is all caused by what was done in the past, I said to them, is it true that you hold that whatever a person experiences is all caused by what was done in the past? Thus asked by me, they admitted yes. Then I said to them, then in that case, a person is a killer of living beings because of what was done in the past. A person is a thief, uncelibate, a liar, a divisive speaker, a harsh speaker, an idle chatterer, greedy, malicious, a holder of wrong views, because of what was done in the past. When one falls back on what was done in the past as being essential, monks, there is no desire, no effort at the thought. This should be done. This shouldn't be done. When one can't pin down as a truth or reality what should and shouldn't be done, one dwells bewildered and unprotected. One cannot righteously refer to oneself as a contemplative. Oh my goodness, wow. Well, I would just like to savor this for a moment. I was just listening to a YouTube video, and per the usual, if I mention it here, I'll drop it in the thread. It's a video that was just dropped, I think today or yesterday, and it was John Vervaeke, who I like a lot, and he's not a Buddhist. I think he kind of falls more in the line of the Platonic, the contemplative Platonic guy. But they were kind of talking about this. There was a panel. There was the moderator was an atheist, I believe. Then there was a woman, I can't think of her name, but she's a very well-known public speaker and author, and she's very devout Christian. And then there's Vervaeke, who I don't know what he calls himself, if anything. But this question was on the table, and kind of discussing and having a good, I would say a very healthy, and hopefully, humans can get back to this idea, a very kind of respectful and healthy debate, about what motivates people, and, the woman who is a devout Christian was explaining, how important it is that humans need stories, and the story of Christ, and the story, and kind of those stories are critical to helping people find their moral compass. And, Buddhism, looks at this from a very different view, a very different lens, and it's much more about practice and kind of seeing for yourself through, right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness, kind of seeing for yourself karma in real time, and kind of coming to see that these monks are, well, what the Buddha would suggest, and really what I think is a great wonderful aspect of Buddhism that truly makes it universal, is that unlike, the tradition that Buddha came up in, Hinduism, and this is not to slight Hinduism, but, there's a caste system playing there, and my understanding is that there's still a belief that awakening is not available to everyone. And again, this is where it gets really dicey for me and where I'm really, really ignorant. But what I do love about Buddhism is, that I really haven't read anything that didn't suggest that Buddha was quite clear that we all have access to make a shift, that we might be coming in at different entry points, but that we can't look to our path. And I love what he's saying here, and he's right? He's saying, look, if karma is true, and not the reincarnation that Westerners confuse it with, as you put in your post, right? As I so agree with you on that, by the way. And again, I agree with your, with your kind of your take on where that might be coming from. And I wholly agree, as someone who, grew up in the West and kind of has observed, it's so interesting, when you live in a place and you study a thing, and I've always been interested in religion. It's fascinating that it's almost like you could, if a fish could talk, right? And you could say, yeah, wow, it's amazing that you live in this water. I could never live in this water. And they'd be like, what water? And that to me is kind of like what Christianity is in the United States. There's just, it's so ingrained that people don't even realize kind of how, and this is, again, this is not to, this is how humans are, right? This is the very nature of fabrication in Buddhism. Which is why the Buddha really recommended that we have a path, because if we don't have a path, we have things like this going on, right? Like we have these last two suttas where either, we're either using it as a kind of sword to be right, or to, or we're using our past karma as an excuse, as a reason to not cultivate discipline and discernment and, all of the skills, that, speaking for myself, I practice, because I genuinely want the world to be happy and more peaceful and free from stress and suffering. And, anyway, I'm going to check the chat. So yeah. And then I'll go on. Yeah. Cha-cha. Jazz hands. Totally. Okay, so let me just see where I am here. Having approached the contemplatives and Brahmins who hold that whatever a person experiences is all caused by a supreme being's act of creation, I said to them, is it true that you hold that whatever a person experiences is all caused by a supreme being's act of creation? Thus asked by me, they admitted yes. Then I said to them, then in that case, a person is a killer of living beings because of a supreme being's act of creation. A person is a thief, uncelibate, a liar, a divisive speaker, a harsh speaker, an idle chatterer, covetous, malicious, a holder of wrong views, because of a supreme being's act of creation. When one falls back on a supreme being's act of creation as being essential, monks, there is no desire, no effort at the thought. This should be done. This shouldn't be done. When one can't pin down as a truth or reality what should and shouldn't be done, one dwells bewildered and unprotected. One cannot righteously refer to oneself as a contemplative. I think even though these stanzas, so much of these stanzas are repeated, and it does remind me of poetry a great deal, this time, although this stanza was repeated, I really saw it again, with fresh eyes the second time I heard it here, which is, this last kind of section that is pretty much repeated verbatim. And I think the word that's jumping out at me is unprotected. Unprotected. As I was watching this video today with Vervaeke and this woman, and they're just both, so intelligent, and it was just fascinating, to watch. I was noticing body language in the woman. I was kind of seeing, some really working with cognitive dissonance. And, maybe I was projecting it. I don't know, right? Somebody just wrote about this in the Discord server about projection and well, how do I know if I'm projecting what's being projected? It's like turtles all the way down. So I don't really know what's going on there. But there just kind of felt like a tension, like a tension. And I think that the tension is kind of because this is what Vervaeke kind of brought up after a fashion. Again, he's not a Buddhist, but he talks about Buddhism a lot, and it's clear that Buddhism clearly informs his, certain of his views. But it was this idea, and I know this can be kind of maybe a harsh pill about Buddhist view if I was to debate, for instance, some of my family, who are very devout Christians. They might have, this might be troubling, and I get it, because cognitive dissonance is massively uncomfortable. I think that's why it's great that, to actually train in sitting in it. I think the Buddha probably encouraged it, I would reckon. But if, to my mind, and again, I'm more of a logos kind of gal, but the ethical thread where capital G God is concerned kind of breaks down really fast, and I think that's why people have struggled with faith of that kind of God for a long time. It's in the West, I have many people that I know who have told me that I struggle to make sense of that. I struggle to make sense that a supreme, all-loving, all-knowing being would create people who would be malicious, and again, I know that there are sound Christian arguments for all of this, and so this isn't for me so much about trying to have a debate with a Christian about it. It's more along the lines of, this was Buddha's argument here, that this is why the Buddha didn't bring some kind of supreme being into it, and again, he reiterates this so often. He seemed to just really he seemed to just be genuinely much more interested in strategy. And I would wager, and as I have mentioned, I have had a couple of experiences where I think when one does, you can't go home again, for starters, so you can't kind of unexperience what you've experienced. And at least speaking for myself, it does kind of, it certainly has lots of questions in my mind of, is it all just whatever? I don't know what that was. I'm going all over the place. At any rate, this is his argument. This is his argument as to why there's not kind of a divine Allah or God or, any other form of kind of, deity that we kind of look to for our marching orders. And again, I'm going to look to the chat to make sure I'm not destroying the Dhamma here. They are repeated because of the oral tradition. For memorization. Yes, thank you. Of course, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, these were monastics. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much. It helps me too. I get it, because every time I read it again, you're like, oh wow, I don't think I noticed that word last time. Okay, well, I'll keep on reading here. So having approached the contemplatives and Brahmins who hold that whatever a person experiences is all without cause, without condition, I said to them, is it true that you hold that whatever a person experiences is all without cause, without condition? Thus asked by me, they admitted yes. Then I said to them, then in that case, a person is a killer of living beings without cause, without condition. A person is a thief, uncelibate, a liar, a divisive speaker, a harsh speaker, an idle chatterer, covetous, malicious, a holder of wrong views, without cause, without condition. When one falls back on lack of cause and lack of condition as being essential, monks, there is no desire, no effort at the thought, in brackets. This should be done. This shouldn't be done. When one can't pin down as a truth or a reality what should and shouldn't be done, one dwells bewildered and unprotected. One cannot righteously refer to oneself as contemplative, and that comes from AN 3:62. So again, here's where I really just want to fall back on. Well, again, I'm just gonna talk about what is coming up for me as I read this. And so what I know that I'll have to do will be to go back after this, unless you write something, and then I'll read it out loud, and then you'll clear me up. But this is where I'm getting into a little bit more than a little bit of outside of my area of knowledge. That the cause and condition is still, I'm very much a novice. And I didn't continue my studies as I ought to get more involved with what that really means. But I'm going to give it a stab, looking at this in context. So I think the thing that's coming up for me, well, and this has always been a little bit of a quandary for me personally. I realize and I appreciate that, and I love too that this is, yeah, of course, repetition. Naturally, yes, this is what you're repeating over and over. And I know that we do this to remember it, and we do it as a training. And the word training, I know, is a very important word in Buddhism. But I also feel very inclined to say right here that when one actually practices meditation, to my view, you don't need these devices anymore. It's very hard to explain. I think it's just, and I realize that there, I probably sound like an absolute loon to many, and anybody who was to say to me, and by the way, the Buddha said this himself, again, this comes in earlier sections of the book, where the Buddha himself said, look, you can't prove this to anybody. And that's why, last week at the end of the section, kind of getting into this idea of, the Buddha as a teacher kind of trying to cultivate this ability to meet students where they are, recognizing the different entry points and the different streams of entry. And rather than trying to be right, as was mentioned earlier in the section, ego, having a genuine compassion and desire for his students to actually have relief from dukkha, tried to meet them where they were, to find an entry point. And I think that becomes a natural process. I don't think that that's something that Buddha had to work hard on. I would wager that probably it was effortless after, through the practice, he kind of saw for himself what he said here, which is that in thought, we see what we should and shouldn't do. And I had somebody interview me. This was years ago. I was kind of co-founded a local branch of an atheist organization in Los Angeles. And I wound up leaving the organization, not because it's not wonderful, because it is wonderful, but I think that I was really grappling with, I am Buddhist, and Buddhism is a religion, and I know the West doesn't like that part, and I get it, and the West does what it does. But I really do try to have as much respect as possible for the origin of the tradition. And so I was really kind of grappling with that at this time that I was in this organization. But I remember it was kind of famous in early days, and this guy came to interview us about it. And so we're sitting there and the cameras, and it was kind of like an interview, like a wide shot, like whatever they call that, a 3-shot or whatever, like they do in TV. And he goes, and I've heard this, this question's so common. If you don't believe in God, then how will you know what's right or wrong? And it's kind of what's being got at here, or what I'm trying to get at here, which is that you just know. And I realize that is just the stupidest thing that anybody could possibly say, right? That any scientist would just look at me and laugh in my face, and what am I going to say? But you become embodied. What am I going to say? You become embodied, and the body informs me. The body informs me of when I was too harsh, when I hurt someone's feelings, when I said the wrong thing, when my intentions were maybe manipulative and were not coming. My body lets me know. And I just stand by that. I'm going to check the chat because I haven't done that in a while. And then I'll keep on. Ooh, this got a long one here. Okay, wait, let me just read this. I'm going to read this aloud, but not to, okay. So this is what we have a guest in the chat today, and I'm going to read what they wrote. But not to worship them. They play various roles, but the key difference is that in Buddhist practice, your practice is very much a case of self-liberation rather than relying on deities for salvation. As a psychologist, what is your perspective of the nature of the cognitive transformation that results from practice? As a former member of an atheist organization, to what extent would you deem Buddhism theist? Wow, this is the really big puzzler for me. Well, let me. Okay, so first of all, thank you for that, for clarifying. For clarifying. The relationship to the deities, and I know there are certain traditions of Buddhism, I think it's Tibetan, right, where they have idols, but they're not like, it's more like what you just said here. So thank you for that, and let me know if I got that wrong. And then your question, wow. Well, I'm a budding psychologist. I'm very, very new. So I'm very, very new at all of this. So bringing in psychological ideas, all of it. To me, the more I study psychology, the more I feel convinced that Buddha was the first psychologist. Buddha understood cognitive dissonance. And there's a lot of, sadly, there's so many terms, but you know what's so great? I'm gonna look them up later when I can remember them all, but there are some terms that are escaping me right now that Buddha really clearly understood, that we are understanding about ourselves psychologically. How we look, that we look to find things in the world to support what we already believe to be true, right? That's something that we do psychologically, that the Buddha said that we do. Cognitive dissonance, again, that's that idea, right? We will go to great lengths to rationalize any behavior because of how uncomfortable it is to hold two opposing views simultaneously. The Buddha knew that as well, and I would even suggest that he's kind of getting to that right here. It's why he's warning us, right? In a way, it's why he's warning us about this idea that if we don't kind of have like the map, right? The introduction of the book, the map to the fire escape. And to my view, if Buddhism isn't for you, not necessarily you on the call, but you listeners, if Buddhism isn't for you, can you find another map? Maybe Christianity is a map for you. Maybe Catholicism, maybe Judaism, maybe whatever, but he understood this about the mind, which is why he said we need a map. Because he understood how we trick ourselves, fool ourselves, hoodwink ourselves, that we are master manipulators and deceivers of ourselves. It's why he knew that we needed a map. So I would say that's kind of what I would say. And then I guess psychology. So I'm going to go back to the second part of that question. Did you say so? Well, I would say for me personally, and also there's a lot of other things that I did in addition to Buddhist practice early days, like that I don't do now. But, when I first started to, I guess you could say, work on myself, if you will, when I first started to kind of notice that I was doing behavior that was causing harm to myself and others. And I think I guess I kind of, if we're going to use the word awakening, I became awake to that behavior within myself. And I think, and I've talked about this before, and because I also come from addiction and I bottomed out, I really kind of just hit the wall with it, where I just, I won't beat that dead horse. But I would say that for me personally, practically what it's done is it has created a huge stopgap between my feelings and my reactions and my thoughts. I would actually say that it slowed down the whole chain, really. If I could really try to put it into words, it slowed down the whole chain. So, what does neuroscientists say about, and I might be getting this wrong, but I think it happens in this order. I think it goes like this. I might have thought and sensation reversed, but I think it goes, well, it's either feeling, I think it's feeling happens first, which produces thought, which produces response, or it might be thought produces, at any rate, the Buddha got all that. And so I think what meditation does for me, and it's definitely why I meditate every day, is the stopgap. So I had a lot of trauma, right? And I was very just, think about like a record skip, just that. I was really just kind of stuck in this pattern of behavior, and it wasn't easy. And I think that the Buddha was right, that you really, the reason why I think Buddhism isn't for everyone is because I do think you need a certain kind of, and this is not like a judgment, like, oh, I'm better, not at all, but there's a certain kind of, I don't know if constitution's the right word, but there's a certain kind of, I don't want to hurt. Yeah, I might just cut all this out because I just want to make it really clear that I'm not judging or there's no hierarchy here. But I do think that you really have to be willing to sit through what might be abject terror. It might be, and it might feel like it's like you're gonna drown, like you're gonna die, And I would even argue that you kind of are dying, after a fashion. You're becoming disidentified, and not everybody's up for that. Not everybody's down for that. I'm realizing, and I'm realizing even that kind of my voice in this industry is not particularly welcome. I'm finding that that people are kind of looking more for like a feel good, like Mick Buddhism kind of deal, where yay, it's kind of like I have a difficult relationship with that too, because I don't want to cling to Buddhism, so it's just a line. Oh, and you're writing great. And then the last question you had was, as a form. See, this is where I feel like I'm not, I try to be really, really respectful, but I just don't see why Buddhism needs to be theist. I mean, everything that I think about, when I think about everything, every piece of Dhamma that I have read, everything that I've heard from a teacher, and granted, again, Western, I don't think that you need to have one. But I'm just not clear that why. What is that? To me, the fact, I don't know that I would call myself here's why I don't use the word atheist with myself. I don't use the word atheist with myself because I have had some things happen to me that I cannot explain. That is the only reason why I don't use the word atheist. The word atheist to my mind suggests, and again, I'm not looking at a dictionary, but it kind of suggests that until you show me proof that there's something else, there is nothing else. And since I had something weird happen that I can't explain, I'm not quite in that camp. I don't know that I feel inclined to put myself in a camp. It's another thing that I like about Buddhism. It's much more about working with phenomena. And that's what I believe in. I believe in phenomena. When I've had really, really hard-hitting, deep meditation experiences that I can't explain, what I was feeling was phenomena. Was there like heat in my body, and was I having other things going on? Yes. But because I didn't train to climb the jhanas in that way, because I trained in more of a Buddhist tradition, I didn't ride the jhanic wave up the ladder. I went down into the body. And that's just because that's the training that I had. I'm going to stop talking. You're still writing. I don't know. So I'm just going to keep reading. I hope that answered your questions. And I'm just going to read a little bit more while you're writing some. So anyway, let's see. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so Sutta 57. Intention, I tell you, is karma. Ah. Can I get a jazz hands? Isn't that kind of sort of what? Yeah, it's kind of sort of what I just said. Well, maybe not, but to my mind, yeah, that's phenomena. Intention is phenomena. You're producing phenomena. Intention, I tell you, is karma. Intending. One does karma by way of body, speech, and intellect. I mean, I feel like he could have just ended it right there, but it's okay. I'm not there to give him, feedback, and he probably wouldn't have asked for it. So I'll read on, but let me read that again, just to really let that settle. So this is Sutta 57. Intention, I tell you, is karma. Intending, one does karma by way of body, speech, and intellect. And what is the cause by which karma comes into play? Contact is the cause by which karma comes into play. And what is the multiplicity in karma? There is karma to be experienced in hell, karma to be experienced in the realm of common animals, karma to be experienced in the realm of the hungry ghosts, karma to be experienced in the human world, karma to be experienced in the world of the devas. This is called the multiplicity in karma. And what is the result of karma? The result of karma is of three sorts, I tell you. That which arises right here and now, that which arises later in this lifetime, and that which arises following that. This is called the result of kama. And what is the cessation of kama? From the cessation of contact is the cessation of kama. And just this Noble Eightfold Path, right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, is the way leading to the cessation of kama. And that comes from AN 6:63. And here's where, I'm so glad that I read this after I responded to your question, because here's where I greatly would benefit from a proper teacher. This is way out of my cultural familiarity and where I'm sorely ignorant, about these realms, which, I definitely remember hearing teachings on these realms. It's been a long time since I've read the Dhamma or books on the Dhamma, and I don't really remember. I'm a very inquisitive person, and I guarantee you back in those early days, I would have been that guy that was raising my hand, constantly saying, what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and what about that? And from what I recall, and again, I would greatly appreciate if you could clear me up on this, because I know that, you have a lot more going on here. My understanding with these realms is... Okay, I'm just going to tell you what I think that kama is in Buddhism. It is phenomena that is wholly comprised of cause and effect. It doesn't necessarily, and this is where I try not to think about it too much, because I don't know that my thinking about it would be helpful. Which is, okay, so do we come back in the same body? And no. And that's where I don't recall getting a lot of teaching, nor was I particularly interested, nor cared. And it could be because of my maybe agnosticism. Back in those days, I would say straight atheism. So these hell realms and the hungry ghost and the animal realms, are these, I don't quite know that I know what that means. And I have to assume that this is the religious part of Buddhism that maybe the West kind of, has a hard time with, particularly because what I find really interesting is that, like I think about people like William James, who came over to the East, like in the 1800s and brought back Buddhism. And, so you had all of these people who were bringing it back. But then you had, I wrote about this last week, you just kind of had the West kind of pick away at it and pick away at it and kind of pick away at it and kind of insert their kind of Judeo-Christian kind of undertones, and it no longer really, and so now I feel a little bit lost as a Westerner, like, is it a place? Is hell a place in Buddhism? Is it my mind? Is it a state of phenomena that you experience in another lifetime after we shed this particular mortal coil? So I'm gonna check the chat, especially because I'd love it if you have an answer for this, because now we're getting into territory that it's just like, wow, I've always struggled with the hell realm and the animal realm and the human realm. I'm sorry. Oh, let me read this. Let me read this for everybody. So this is what the visitor is writing here. Jazz hands, for starts. Where is the line drawn between symbolism and literal belief? I struggle with this when in communities where you get a division who use the same words, but the semantics are divided along these lines. There are devas in some of the realms. That is where you encounter them in your path, and apparently you interact with them. After the show, I will share the pantheology with you. They are phenomenally as real as the sky is blue. There is hell in Buddhism. I will share a sutra with you. You don't have to believe, you have to see it for yourself. Oh, wow. What you're reminding me of is, when you say you have to see it for yourself, do you mean in meditation? It's making me think. I shared this story. I actually already shared the story, so I'll keep it really, really short. But there's somebody that I listened to on YouTube, and he was talking about when he was still practicing as a Zen monk, that they were sitting one day, and as he put it, they were dialing it in, and they were meditating. That's how he put it. And he said all of a sudden he just heard this woman that was in the hall just give this horrified, piercing, kind of scream. And later told him that, he didn't ask her what she saw, and she didn't really, go into it. But apparently he said it just sounded like a blood curdling, is that the hell realm? In other words, in Buddhism, is that what a hell realm is? That in meditation, she touched what is possible in the field? I've definitely had some pretty crazy things happen in the field. So there is a description of it. Okay, great. In Buddhism, in hell, bad karma is resolved. Yeah, I look forward to reading more about this. Like, I think I still struggle to... It's a good thing to go to hell. Oh my gosh, how fascinating. Okay. And so like, is hell like another... Is hell a reincarnated state? Is that kind of what that... Well, anyway, great, you're writing. I'm gonna try to get a little bit more here. But this is great. I'm loving this, because we're now getting into the stuff that has always just been so beyond my reach that I just don't understand. So this is really helpful. So Sutta 58. And what is kama, that is dark, with dark result? There is the case where a certain person fabricates an injurious bodily fabrication, fabricates an injurious verbal fabrication, fabricates an injurious mental fabrication. Having fabricated an injurious bodily fabrication, having fabricated an injurious verbal fabrication, having fabricated an injurious mental fabrication, he re-arises in an injurious world. On re-arising in an injurious world, he is there touched by injurious contacts. Touched by injurious contacts, he experiences feelings that are exclusively painful, like those of the beings in hell. This is called kama, that is dark with dark result. Wow, so did this just answer my question right here? I'll go back and look at the Discord here in just a moment, but I just want to reflect here, because I'm also factoring in what the guest is sharing here, which is teaching me more about the Buddhist view about what these ideas mean. So kind of trying to factor all of this in here. Here's what's coming to top of mind for me. So what is being said, that we come back into form and our life experience, the phenomena that arises when we are in, not we, but this language, right? Because there is no we. Okay, so let me back up the truck a little bit. So hell equals coming into form, and and although one has some agency in entering the stream at some point because of past karma, maybe in this particular, how am I doing? I feel like I'm just getting more in the soup. Do you see why I kind of like don't talk about, because at a certain point, like, I don't, here's the thing. Okay, there's this 3D Max theater in LA. I live in LA. There's this 3D Max theater in downtown LA. I don't know if you've ever been to like one of these things before. So I go down there, and so you're basically like in a like a dome, okay, this particular theater. And you're lying, the seats, you're kind of lying back, really relaxed, almost like you're gonna body scan. And you're looking up at this screen that's almost taking up the whole sky. And you're looking at footage from the Hubble telescope. So this is obviously a while ago. And when I'm looking at that, and there's just stuff racing through my body, and I'm sobbing, and I look over at my husband, and he's sobbing. And on a certain level, I don't know what that is, and I don't think that I need to know what that is, and I don't even need to know if there is a that, if that makes any sense. I'm going to look at the Discord. Ooh. Oh, thank you. This is great. Okay, so got a great resource here, which I'll reshare in the thread for this book club. And you say, not necessarily reincarnated. Okay, this is great. So I am going to move on for sure. And I just saw the time. Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to go here in just a few minutes. But I look forward to reading into this, and then I'll do my due diligence. And when I come back next time, I'll let you know what I found out about where I was wrong and what I learned. Messenger of the Devas, unconditional compassion. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you for your kind words earlier too. And yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I do. I take this pretty seriously. I'm not the fun guy at the party. All right. Sleep tight. It's 4 a.m. I bow to you. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you. And yeah, sleep tight. Take care.